Howdy, friends. Since today is the last school day before Easter, I wanted to share with you one of my very favorite Easter books. It's actually a classic Easter story. It was written, I believe, in 1939. You know, when you are looking at a book, go past the cover and the title page. Usually on the back of the title page, there's information. Usually it's in small letters, but it will talk about where the book was printed and things like that. But there's a date called the copyright date, and that's the day that the book was published. And I'm thinking if I get this close enough, you'll be able to see that it was written in 1939. So this is a book that my mom read to me and my grandma read to me when I was your age. And I'd like you to think as we read this story, is this fiction or nonfiction? So the title is The Country Bunny and the Little Gold Shoes. So if you take a look at the picture on the cover, and we'll take a sneak peek at some of the pictures. Okay. And so what do you think? Do you think this is, maybe I'll go to the middle of the book. I think this is going to be fiction or nonfiction. Let's see, fiction or nonfiction. Here's one of my favorite parts of the book. All right, so let's read, and I hope you made your prediction. And now, as we read, think about your prediction if it's correct. So here we go. The book starts out like this. I just have to make room for my chair so that you can see the picture better. All right. It says, "We hear of the Easter Bunny, who comes each Easter day before sunrise to bring eggs for the boys and the girls. So we think there is only one. But this is not so. There are really 5 Easter bunnies. And they must be the 5 kindest and swiftest and wisest bunnies in the whole wide world. Because between sunset on Easter Eve and dawn on Easter morning, they do more work than most rabbits do in a whole year. And when one of the 5 Easter bunnies gets old and tired and can no longer run fast, then the old, wise, and kind grandfather bunny, who lives in the palace of the Easter eggs, calls the bunnies together from all over the world to select the very best one to take his or her place. Often a mother bunny says to her child, "Now, if you learn to be wise and kind and swift, someday you can grow up to be one of the 5 Easter bunnies." And all the babies try their best so that they can grow up and go to work with Grandfather Bunny at the palace of the Easter eggs. One day, a little country girl bunny with brown skin and a little cotton ball of a tail said, "Someday I will grow up to be the Easter Bunny, or one of the Easter bunnies. You wait and see." And the big white bunnies who lived in fine houses. And the jackrabbits with long legs who can run so fast, they just laughed at little Cottontail and told her to go back to the country and eat a carrot. But she said, "You wait and see." Well, the little girl Cottontail grew up to be a young lady Cottontail. And by she had a husband And then one day, much to her surprise, there were 21 cottontail babies for her to take care of. 21. Bunny rabbits are known for having lots of babies. Then the big white rabbits and the jackrabbits with long legs laughed and laughed and said, "What do we tell you? Only a country bunny would go and have all those babies. Now you take care of them and leave Easter eggs to great big men bunnies like us." And they went away liking themselves very much. Cottontail stopped thinking about hopping over the world with lovely eggs for little boys and girls, and she focused on taking care of her babies. And one day, when her children stopped being babies and were little girl and little boy bunnies, she called them to her and said, "Now we are going to have some fun." And then to two of them, she gave them brooms and showed them how to sweep the cottage. And to two more, she taught them how to make the beds. Two more bunnies went to work with her in the kitchen, and in no time at all had found out how to cook a good dinner. These two bunnies, they became the dishwashers, and they made the glasses shine like crystal. Two other bunnies got wash tubs full of soap suds, and they washed all the clothes and the linen. These two bunnies did the sewing and the mending. Two other bunnies who had sweet voices were taught to sing. And two more were taught to dance. And these amused all the others while they worked so that they were all happy and in good spirits. These two bunnies were taught how to dig in the garden and plant the food. These two bunnies were given paints and crayons so they could make pretty pictures for the walls. And when Mother Cottontail had given out all of the jobs of the household, she looked around, and there was only one little boy bunny left, and he was sad and lonely. And then Mother Cottontail said to him, "You are the most polite of all my baby bunnies, so I shall make you keeper of my chair, and whenever I come to dinner, you shall seat me politely at the table." And then one day, when the little rabbits were half grown up, she heard a great talk amongst the wood rabbits. And when she asked what it was all about, they said, "Haven't you heard? One of the 5 Easter bunnies has gotten too slow, and we are going to the Palace of the Easter Eggs to see old grandfather pick a new one to take his place." So she called all her little cottontails, and they all set off to the palace to see the fun. But their mother was sad, because she thought that now that she was nothing but an old mother bunny and could only look on, that the big, handsome white rabbits or the long-legged jackrabbits, one of them would get chosen. When they came to the Palace of the Easter Eggs, there were bunnies everywhere on the great lawn. And the ones that hoped to be the Easter bunny, well, they stood together and all the others looked at them and clapped their paws. Then the big front door opened and the old, wise and kind grandfather bunny came hopping slowly out. And he told the biggest bunnies and those with the longest legs to show what they could do. They jumped and ran and showed off their pretty white fur. And they were all very fast, and some of them were very clever. But still, the grandfather bunny did not pick one. And he said to them, "You are pretty, and you are fast, but you have not shown me that you are either kind or wise." Then his kind old eyes looked everywhere, and at last they rested on little Cottontail Mother, where she stood with her children all around her. And he called her to come right up to the palace steps. So she took her 21 children and went up and stood before him. And when he spoke, his voice was so kind that she was not frightened at all. And he said, "What a large family you have, my dear. I suppose they take all of your time." But she said, "When they were babies, that was so. But now they are well trained, so well trained that they do most of the work for me." "Ah," he said, smiling, "so you must be very wise to train so many children so well. But tell me, do they always look so happy? And do they always hold their ears up so prettily?" "Indeed they do," she answered. "We never have a tear or a cross word in our little country cottage. And if I do say so myself, they do carry their ears better than most bunnies." Then he said, patting the nearest bunny on the head, "You must be very kind indeed to have such a happy home. It is too bad that you have no time to run and grow swift, as I might well have made you my 5th Easter bunny." At that, Mother Cottontail started to laugh, and then she whispered to all the little bunnies, and every rabbit on the lawn looked to see what would happen, and the old grandfather bunny leaned forward to watch. Suddenly, all of the 21 children raced away, and Cottontail dashed after them, and in no time at all, she had gathered them back up in front of the palace. And then the old, kind, wise grandfather bunny said, "I see that you are swift also. It is too bad that you cannot go to carry my eggs, because you will have to stay home to take care of your children." Mother Cottontail nodded her head to the little ones as they all formed a line and bowed low to the grandfather. And then she stepped in front of them and said, "They will take care of the house better than I." And then she called them up 2 by 2s, and as she put her hands on the heads of each pair, she said, "These 2 are my sweepers. They keep the cottage as clean as your hand. These 2 make the beds without a wrinkle. These 2 cook my dinner, and those 2 wash the dishes. These 2 tend to the garden. These 2 wash and dry all the clothes. These 2 bunnies do the mending. Those 2 sing, and those other 2 dance to keep us happy while we work. These 2 are learning to paint pretty pictures for our walls, and this littlest one of all always pulls out my chair for me when I sit at the table." So you see, I can leave them to take care of the home until I come home. And then the old, kind, wise grandfather said, "You have proved yourself to be not only wise and kind and swift, but also very clever. Come to the palace tomorrow afternoon, for that is Easter Eve, and you shall be my 5th Easter bunny." The next evening, Cottontail knocked on the big front door and was admitted to the palace. There she stood in her funny country clothes, but none of the other 4 Easter bunnies laughed, for they were wise and kind, and they knew better. So look at the picture as she's hopping up to the front door of the palace. Look at that. Here's the 5 Easter bunnies. The 4 other Easter bunnies showed her all over the palace, from room to room, all piled high with eggs of gold and silver, eggs that glittered like snow, chocolate eggs, marshmallow eggs, eggs for rich children and eggs for poor children, for children who were sick and children who were well, all over the world. Then, as soon as it was dark enough for the children to be asleep all over the world, the old, wise, kind grandfather gave the word, and the 5 bunnies set to work as fast as they could. First one, then another would take up a large egg or a pretty little basket, and in a single leap and hop would be out of the palace and away out of sight. Then in a moment, he would be back again, and before you could say Jack Robinson, he would have whisked away again. And it should say he or she. Slowly the night wore away, and the bunnies began to look tired as they kept returning for more and more eggs. And in the palace, the glittering piles grew smaller and smaller. Poor little Cottontail was very tired, for this was the first time she had ever gone so far or so fast in her life, and she was beginning to hope that she would soon be able to take the little basket that was set aside for her own children and go hopping home when the old, wise, kind grandfather called her to him. When she went close, she saw that he was holding in his hand the loveliest egg she had ever seen. It glittered like a diamond. "Peek through and see what you shall see," he said. So she peeked. She peeked through the little hole in one end, and she saw a beautiful scene with a sleigh and a lake with people skating on thin ice. And she said, he, Grandfather Bunny said, "because you have such a loving heart for children, I'm going to give you the best but the hardest trip of all. For off over 2 rivers and 3 mountains there is a great mountain peak. And in a little cottage on that peak is a little boy who has been ill for a whole year and who has been so brave that never once has he cried or complained. The mountain is so high that there is ice on the top, and it will be hard to climb. But if you get there, you will give more happiness than any other Easter bunny." Cottontail picked up the egg very gently and went hopping away on her journey. She crossed the first river and then the second. She went over the first mountain and then up another mountain and yet another, till at last she reached the highest mountain of all. And she was very tired when at last she got to the bottom of the great peak, and her heart failed her when she saw how high it was and how slippery with ice was the snow on top. But holding the egg very carefully, she started hopping up. At last she reached the ice and the snow, and now she was almost to the top. She could see the little cottage all covered with snow where the little boy was sleeping. And then a terrible thing happened. Her foot slipped, and down she came. Down she flew into snowdrifts. Then she left the ice and snow, and rolling and bouncing against the stones, she felt the air getting warmer as she went down the mountain. Down, down she went. As she crashed through the thicket of budding laurel, she rolled across the pasture and finally struck her head against the trunk of a great apple tree that was just getting ready to bloom for Easter. And there she lay, with the egg still safely clutched in her paw, but with a great pain in her leg. She tried to rise again, because she saw a lovely pink light in the sky, and she knew that in a few minutes more it would be day, and the little boy would be sad if she did not get his egg to him. But the pain was so bad that she fell down. Then she felt something touch her shoulder, and she looked up, and there, right before her, way off there in that distant land, all of a sudden, there was the wise, kind old Grandfather Bunny. And he smiled at her and he said, "You are not only wise and kind and swift, but you are the bravest of all the bunnies. And I shall make you my very own golden shoe Easter bunny." And he reached over, and she saw for the first time that he was holding a tiny pair of gold shoes in his hand. See them? And he bent down and he put them on her feet. As soon as he did so, The pain suddenly left her leg, and she stood up and picked up the precious egg. And then, before she knew what was happening, she felt a sudden motion, and she found herself flying high in the air. Over the pasture she flew, over the laurel, over the stones, until at last, when she landed, she looked back and saw that she was in one single jump that carried her halfway up the mountain. Then she jumped once again, and there she was at the cottage door. She quickly opened up the door, squeezed through the tiny crack that had been left there just in case the bunny did come all that way, and into the hand of the sleeping boy she placed the egg. Then, just as the Easter morning sun rose over the edge of the world, she jumped quickly back to the palace, where she found her little Easter basket for her own little bunnies. And then she went hopping back home to give them a happy Easter. Mother Cottontail found that the garden was tended. And sure enough, just as she had said, everything was in order. The floors were swept, and there were 2 lovely new pictures painted and hanging on the wall. The dishes were washed, and they shone in the cupboard. The clothes were washed and mended, and they were neatly put away and hung up in the closet. And her 21 children were all sound asleep in their little beds. And the little house of Mother Cottontail can always be told from the houses of all the other bunnies, because there is a special place on the wall, on a very special hook, where there hangs a pair of very tiny little gold shoes. The end. The story of the country bunny and the little gold shoes. The author, her name was DuBose Hayward. Pictures by Marjorie Hack. Written in 1939. If my math is correct, that's 81 years ago. So now you know the rest of the story. So I ask you, fiction or nonfiction? I hope you enjoyed the story. I hope you have a very happy Easter and a peaceful and relaxing break. I do have a special Easter greeting video for you later in the lesson plan today. And I'll be thinking of you and praying for us to be together soon. And in the meantime, I'll look forward to seeing you right after spring break. Take care. Bye.